think the overarching thing that I would say is that I see a lot of women, and I am this person as well. I try to do this. We're constantly reinforced in life that we can do it all and have it all by ourselves. And I would argue that you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. And so understanding that you're currently in this season of life where you are a new mum and that your job is just to, you know, recover and to bond with your baby and feed your baby. And that is enough. Like, that is enough for you to do. So don't worry about the dishwasher. It's still going to be there. Our dirty dishes are still in the kitchen. They will still be there. But just take the time to understand that your body is amazing and that you don't have to bounce back. If anything, take the time now, build and respect your body now, and you are going to pay dividends in the future for all of that.
So, what I want to first of all ask you is the fourth trimester. What is it?
Good question. And you know what? A lot of people may not have even heard of the fourth trimester as well. So obviously we have the 3 trimesters of pregnancy, and this is the fourth. And the fourth is obviously post baby's arrival. It is, if we want to map it out in terms of dates, it's probably the first 12 weeks after baby has arrived. And people typically use this term, the fourth trimester, when they're talking about the period of time that mothers should be focusing on rest and repleting their body with beautiful, nourishing food, and just taking time to bond with their baby as well. And that's a really important time to do that because for a number of reasons, obviously, they've just gone through pregnancy, which is a huge kind of energy depleting stage of life. And our beautiful babies suck the life out of us. Um, and on top of pregnancy, we've got the actual birth. So whether that was a sprint or a marathon for some, it could be the C-section as well as, all the laboring as well. And then on top of that, if mothers choose to breastfeed, then that's another kind of huge energy expenditure as well. So we look at those layers and we think, yes, now is the time that we need to honor our bodies and that we need to rest and relax and replete all of those lost nourishment, micronutrients and things like that. But another key thing also is that our babies don't actually realize that they're out of the womb during that fourth trimester. And it's a really interesting concept because when I work with parents, they it's almost like they get this like false hope of this, oh, our baby just sleeps all the time and it's so beautiful and they're so settled. And I just wait. I just smile and nod and wait. And then our babies really wake up to the outside world. And that's when they become um, quite, and I don't want to use the word clingy, but they're very aware if you leave them. And that's when kind of stress starts to happen for parents. So it is a time where we do need to kind of take a step back and just, I think, honor our bodies and respect ourselves and not have that bounce back attitude as well when it comes to the fourth trimester.
And so, Renee, just thinking like both culturally, we're obviously both based in Australia, or you're in Tasmania, but culturally, things have changed. The expectation on mums has changed for many reasons, but there are definitely cultures in the world where women, pretty much will stay in bed and just feed baby, and they'll be sort of really supported by other probably women within the family circle. And obviously nowadays, a lot of people don't live multi-generationally in the same household, and people often live maybe different sides of the country or different sides of the world from their family. So how much is the cultural impact of what people's expectation is around this time impacting what goes on?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and we are seeing, we do see this a lot in Australia. Because Australia is quite a multicultural, country as it is, it's very interesting to see the different cultures within the community, and as a doula, what I see is I see a lot of, mothers to be who may have Chinese or Indian or Korean kind of background. And they know from their own sisters and mothers and aunties that when someone has a baby, that they would have in-home support and help. Like literally someone comes and lives in their home and supports them and makes sure that there's plenty of bed rest and certain foods are cooked in the kitchen and they're nourishing their bodies, and maybe if they've got older children, that those children are well looked after so you can focus on bonding with the new baby. And so I see this, and then they are engaging doula services a lot because it's the norm. That is very normal for them to do that. Whereas people like myself, who were kind of just brought up in very kind of, stock standard Australian lifestyles, we kind of have this attitude of you just do it alone. And that's just what you do because that's what everyone has done all of their lives. But we are seeing the burnout. We're seeing, increase in postnatal depression and anxiety. I don't have the research to back that there's that, direct link, but I would argue, and I see this at the coalface as a doula, the stress that women put themselves under because they have these preconceived notions that they look around and go, hold on a minute, this is really hard to be a mum by myself. And where is my village? And how do people actually get through this? So, um, I will say that being a Melbourne girl, I was there through the COVID lockdowns, and we did see it was like a very interesting experiment, I will have to say, because we were put in our homes and we had to stay there for extended period of time. We saw women actually taking the foot off the gas. We saw mums engaging doula services more because they didn't have friends and family who could just pop in when they wanted to. And there was this real shift and this real awareness, and I can see the ripple effect happening of people going, this whole having someone in the home and looking after you and making meals and supporting you, this is actually really good. Like, why are we not doing this more? So I think I think there is a shift happening in Australia for sure. We're seeing the rise of things like postpartum hotels, which are stock standard in countries like Korea, which is very exciting to have here in Australia. So,
So tell me about
what?
that. I've never heard of a postpartum hotel. What is that?
Oh, wow! So this is essentially a a home that you can go to. And they've got these beautiful rooms and a full set of staff. So they'll have naturopaths, lactation consultants, a midwife, all the allied healthcare professionals there in this beautiful home. You get all your meals cooked for you. And it is just like a beautiful village of women around you supporting you, and it's typically about 4 or 5 nights, and you can stay there with your partner and your baby's there, and you're well looked after. So there's one in Melbourne. It's actually called Home, but with a B at the end, so womb but home, those words mesh together. And then there's also one in Sydney called Born with an E on the end. So I think that we've just got the rise of those happening, and it's, as I said, it's this beautiful kind of ripple effect going through the community at the moment.
Wow, that's amazing. So you've mentioned a label of doula a few times, and I know that's what you are. What is a doula?
Great question. The first time I ever say I'm a doula, people think I'm saying I'm a jeweler. So I love jewelry, but I'm not a jeweler. So a doula it's a non-medical professional. It's someone who has typically been trained. These days, there's fantastic courses that you can do. But it is essentially someone who comes into your home and looks after you after you've had a baby. It is very mother centric. We're not nannies. We're not there to necessarily, look after your baby. We do, but it is all about supporting mum. It is making sure that mum is being nourished. So we will cook meals in your home. We will tidy up around your house. We will give you really good non-judgmental support. And that's a really key thing, that emotional support, holding space for them, giving them an opportunity to have a birth debrief, which is very, very important. We know that from the research. And essentially, one of my first clients said to me, "You know what, Renee? You're kind of like the Mary Poppins of mothers." And I thought, yeah, we kind of are, aren't we? So essentially, we're kind of like that. We're like your best friend rolled into one. But essentially, it's that consistency and that continuity of care after you return from hospital or you have your home birth, where you've got that village around you supporting you through the first stages of motherhood.
And so, but you can also have a doula who is with you during your delivery. Is that a separate group
Absolutely.
of
Yes.
doulas?
Yeah. So a doula can be full spectrum from birth to death. So, birth doulas, there's a lot of research behind that in terms of the positive outcomes that you can have for having a birth doula. And that is around better birth outcomes, better breastfeeding outcomes. You're less likely to have pain medication or go through what we call the cascade of intervention when it comes to birth. There's not any research currently around postpartum doulas, and then doulas can also be engaged for death as well to help support you and your family. So we're there every step of the way, essentially.
Okay. And one of the things that you mentioned there, I have to say, as a GP, I have really picked up on is women do want to debrief about their birth experience. I feel like there's often not that space. I do try whenever we see people at that 6 week postnatal appointment, but they'll often present before that. And often things haven't gone the way the person's expected at all, and it can be quite shocking and scary, and again, in the hospital setting, sometimes that doesn't really there doesn't seem to be an opportunity to debrief. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on debriefing after a delivery, whether it's been good, bad, or horrendous.
So we essentially know that in order for a mother to thrive, she needs four pillars. The first one is psychological support. The second one is emotional and physical support. The third one is reliable and realistic information. And the fourth one is sharing of experiences, preferably with other mothers. And so believe that, having that opportunity to debrief about your birth, whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever it is a fantastic opportunity to channel into all four of those pillars. And it is one of those things that we know, and, speaking to people who work in this space, if you don't have that opportunity to do that, it will sit with you for a very long time. And we know from speaking with psychologists, it will just rear its ugly head at other moments, or you go to have a second baby and it will come up again. And so having the opportunity to talk to someone who is non-judgmental is really, really important. Someone who's just there to listen, not to problem solve, not to compare experiences, but just to listen and have space. The other thing I will say also is that it's really important to speak to your partner about it as well, and to give them an opportunity to debrief individually and together. We often find that in that moment of laboring, you can just really draw into yourself and you lose track of time and space. And so partners often are able to fill in those gaps for you. And so that's where it's a really beautiful opportunity for the two of you to sit down and work through those together. Um, but if it is something that uh, was you don't think it was a traumatic event, you might actually evolve into thinking, actually, hold on a minute, that that wasn't something that sat well with me, because we know the statistics in Australia currently are that 1 in 3 women experience birth trauma, and so it is a very good idea to talk through it with close friends and family, and if you think that you need further assistance, to seek out a professional for that as well to work through it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Renee, I know that you've got obviously a very incredible scientific background as well as your doula qualifications and experience. What is actually happening in a woman's body after they give birth, both sort of physically and emotionally? What is going on?
Mm, so many things. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on that alone. I probably want to take a step back and go from conception, because that's actually where things start to completely change for women. And a lot of people don't realize this. So, at the point of conception, your brain starts to completely remodel, which is absolutely fascinating. And what happens in that moment, and it sounds dire, but it's not, I assure you. The gray matter in your brain starts to actually reduce. And what that is doing, and I try to reinforce this to mums, is that I like to call it you're leveling up. You're leveling up in skill sets that are going to optimize your mind and your body to become the best mum that you can be. So you're leveling up in skills like empathy, facial recognition, emotional intelligence. Um, and the thing that I love about this, so for example, with the visual recognition, we all realize that our babies can't speak like you and I do in English. It's crying, it's different facial kind of expressions, things like that. And so, what this leveling up enables us to do is to literally be able to look at someone's face, for them to not say words, and for us to recognize certain emotions and things that are happening to them. So it's like a superpower that we get as mums. We also get, great up levels of, bonding and things like that. So that's what's going through our brain. And we're getting that kind of evolution all through pregnancy. Um, and then they have mapped it out, which there's been some great MRI studies of mapping pregnant women's brains through preconception all the way through pregnancy and then postpartum. So it tends to kind of level out after postpartum. There is some argument around whether it comes back to quote unquote normal brain morphology. But the fascinating thing that I think is so cool is that each and every pregnancy, it remodels again. So some would argue that you actually level up time and time again, and you could say that you go from expert to genius every time you have another baby, which I think is yeah, so you're at like genius level, Shauna. So you could take that for sure. But yeah. So I think in terms of your brain remodeling, that plays into lots of different things. It's this a lot of mums feel a shift in self-identity because they're just like, oh my God, what is this change? They start to feel a bit foggy. Most people will hear it called baby brain, which I absolutely hate that phrase, but that's what society has kind of pinned us down as. But that is just your brain remodeling, gearing up to become the best mum that you can possibly be. But you do get that shift in identity and that change in your priorities, because your job is to bond and to feed your baby, who is now 100% reliant on you to survive. So it makes sense that that that's what's actually happening.
Okay, that makes sense. And in terms of the pressure to kind of bounce back, and be, on Instagram, looking thin, looking amazing with your hair done and your makeup done. Like that seems to be a whole different kind of pressure than it even was 20 years ago. What would you say to women listening who maybe are pregnant or have just had a baby, or maybe someone who's listening whose daughter's just had a baby, who's really putting themselves under that pressure? What does the evidence tell us about how long we should actually be giving our body to bounce back?
Yeah, good question. I don't know how much evidence there is, Shauna, because we don't really value women's research very much. But I, I, I think anecdotally, some people say, and this is where the fourth trimester comes in. If you look after yourself in the first 40 days, you're going to be so the benefits are going to be amazing for the next 40 years. Because if you think about the stress that our body is under during pregnancy, I mean, we're growing eyeballs and fingers and spines and hearts and things like that. That takes 9 months, 10 months to do. We then have to birth our babies. That's a huge amount of stress as well. Um, so I think as an individual, you just need to stop and think, I need to give myself a bit of grace. My body has just done an amazing, magnificent thing. I have made life, I've birthed life. And if you choose to breastfeed, you are then, feeding them from your body. That's a huge energy expenditure. And I think, my biochemistry brain kind of kicks in here. And I would argue that if we could see on the outside, I guess, the energy expenditure with all of the activities that we've done, like, I think people would then visualize and go, oh, wow, that's a lot. And maybe we compare it to running a marathon and we think, oh, we look at other people and go, wow, they ran a marathon. That's amazing. Oh, man, I could never do that. Pregnant women are literally running a marathon every day that they are pregnant. Let's be honest, in terms of the metabolic rate that our body is kind of churning around. So I think, first of all, as an individual, you need to give yourself a bit of grace and just go, wow, this is an amazing thing. I think if you are someone on the periphery, if it's your daughter, if it's your daughter-in-law, it's your sister, whoever it is, I think you also need to provide just a lot of positive talk. If you hear them putting themselves down, oh my gosh, my belly is so wobbly now, and my boobs are just one's bigger than the other because I'm feeding and stuff like that. I think you just also need to reinforce to them how magnificent their body is and that they've been able to do this amazing feat. And also remind them that this is the season of life that they're currently in, and that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to feel like that, but there's going to be a new normal for them after that as well.
Are you struggling to navigate the perimenopause or curious to learn more about the menopause from some of the top experts in this space? I am so excited to tell you about an upcoming event, She Thrives, an evening in conversation with myself, Dr. Kelly Casperson, who joined me in episode 89 for a brilliant chat about sex during midlife, and Dr. Vonda Wright, who was on episode 54, who shared how to conquer midlife and beyond with strength training and nutrition. Join us on Monday the 3rd of March at Newcastle City Hall from 7 p.m. A percentage of every ticket purchased will also be donated to the Debbie Gaunt Foundation, which supports women's mental health during these transitional years. To book your spot, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to see you there. This is one you're not going to want to miss. Can we take a little bit of a turn and talk about postnatal depression? What it is, how common it is, and what we should be doing to try and prevent it if we can.
Here in Australia, the current statistic is 1 in 5 mothers will experience postnatal depression and or anxiety. I personally believe that those statistics are pretty underrated. Um, I would probably, especially given COVID and things like that, I would say it's probably more 1 in 3, to be honest. I don't think those statistics have been refined for quite some time. They would argue in the research that it is more closely to 1 in 3, but the big organisations here in Australia like Panda and Gidget Foundation, they do amazing work, but I think their current standpoint is 1 in 5. So postnatal depression is it's a disorder where, if it's your kind of friend or your sister that you're looking upon, some of the signs that you can look for if you suspect that they're suffering from it are things like um, they feel very disconnected. They're not very connected and have issues with kind of bonding with their baby. So they may not want to spend a lot of time with their new child. Um, I don't like to talk about fatigue because all us mums are tired, right? Like we are all exhausted and there is a lot of sleep deprivation. But when we're looking at postnatal depression, we're thinking about things like excessive fatigue, like even after you've rested for a bit and you've had opportunity to have a bit of recovery and support, you still are feeling quite, difficult to get to sleep or, just, you know, completely and utterly wiped. Um, there's other kind of signs, including anxiety, panic attacks, um, appetite change as well. So if you just don't want to eat, or you're massively overeating, so it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. Um, and then we kind of get all the way down to, if there's thoughts about harming yourself or your baby and things like that. So those are probably kind of the spectrum of signs that you would be looking for.
Yeah, and people, some of the ones that I would see would people would be describing like feeling that they're to blame for things going wrong, or that they're feeling quite inadequate, or being excessively tearful. So obviously it is definitely an emotional time. There can be happy tears and sad tears and exhausted tears, but if you're crying a lot and you don't seem to be able to just stop crying, then that would also perhaps be another sign that it's definitely time to have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so let's say we have people listening who are maybe trying to support someone who already does have a diagnosis of postnatal depression, or the family are thinking that that's what might be going on. What's a good thing to do to help?
I would probably say listen. Just listen to them. I think a lot of people go into conversations and we do. Like if they're people that we love and we want them to have, to be happy and fulfilled and joyful and things like that. And we kind of want to problem solve instinctively. But maybe that's not the route that we want to go down at this point in time. We just want to hold space for them. We want to listen to them. We want to provide a non-judgmental ear. We don't want to be comparing our story with their story. It's just about holding space. If if that's something that you struggle with to do, um, calling Panda or the Gidget Foundation, they have fantastic hotlines, and For When as well. They can give you really great resources around conversation starters or specific language to use when supporting mums who are going through postnatal depression. And equally, they've got great support for partners as well, how to have those conversations and support them. Because I think I always like to talk about the partners because they often get forgotten in these types of chats. But it's incredibly difficult to be a partner and see your loved one go through those types of experiences. So there's lots of support there from those organizations.
And don't say things like, come on, this should be the happiest time of your life. What's
Yeah,
wrong
you
with
should be
you?
grateful. Our baby's healthy and 10 fingers, 10 toes. Like, oh, please don't say those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, what are the things that you maybe see in practical ways that perhaps people do that they think they're being helpful, but it's probably not that helpful. Just whether it's someone with postnatal depression or just a mum in the fourth trimester, what are the things that people think they're being really helpful, but perhaps not?
Turning up uninvited. That would probably be like the number one thing I would say. And look, it depends on the mum. It depends on the personality. Like some things I found infuriating that people did. And for others, when I've shared that experience, they've said, "Oh my god, I would have loved that." So I guess it just depends. But I think I would say always let a mum know if you're going to be, turning up on the doorstep. Um, I would always encourage to bring a meal or a snack. Like, don't turn up empty-handed. I have a funny joke with all of my doula clients that when the baby arrives, they essentially become currency. So, if you want baby cuddles, so 10 minutes of cuddles is a load of laundry. 20 minutes of cuddles is like a full wipe down of the kitchen, empty the dishwasher, and so on and so forth. So, it's a bit of a running joke, but I'm also totally serious about it because I think that's what we need to be doing as well. So yeah, in terms of not helpful things, again, it would be saying things like, "Oh, well, at least everything's okay." And if a mum's kind of trying to talk to you about a traumatic birth, then just being supportive of them and listening. But for things to help out, I would say if they've got a dog, walk the dog. If they've got lawn, mow the lawn. If they've got toddlers, take the toddler to the park so they can have a rest with the baby or something like that. Hold the baby while they go have a shower. Really useful, practical things like that. But food is always my number one. Like everyone should have a stocked fridge and freezer full of food because it's hard to cook food, especially when you have a barnacle baby like I did.
The thing I think that people shouldn't do is give unsolicited advice. I think if the person asks, what did you do when your baby kept crying, or what did you do when you couldn't get the baby to sleep, then yep, that's your opportunity to
That's your gateway,
to
yeah.
dive in and talk. But otherwise, because unfortunately, whenever people get advice and they're already exhausted and feeling, often feeling that they're not doing a great job and they're not feeling confident in themselves, sometimes that advice can feel like criticism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's what I mean, like, don't compare yourself to, in your experiences with them because every baby's different and every motherhood experience is totally different. So, yeah, and that should be, praised. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of if someone was thinking about doula versus lactation consultant, is there overlap? Are they completely different?
Mm. Um, we're pretty stead in we stick to our own lane, particularly here at Fill Your Cup. There's a couple of different reasons. One, doulas are not in a regulated industry, whereas a lactation consultant is. And then the other thing I'd probably like to talk about is the fact that there's lactation consultants and then there's, internationally board credited lactation consultants. So they're two very different things. Um, and so doula support, it's an added extra to have training in terms of, breastfeeding counseling, as they can call it. All of our doulas at Fill Your Cup have a really basic understanding of breastfeeding support and bottle feeding as well. But in terms of a lactation consultant, if you're an IBCLC, that's a 4-hour exam. I think it's like 10 10 subjects and 500 hours of face-to-face support. Very, very different kind of kettle of fish we're talking about here, which is also another reason why we have such close relationships with key IBCLCs across Australia to support our mums. Because whilst we're in home and we are able to identify red flags in terms of feeding, um, there is absolutely a time and a place where we say, yep, this is outside our scope and we're going to refer now to our IBCLC. So, yeah, very, very different.
And in terms of, we are very lucky and blessed where we live. We often have quite good access to lots of services. Do you think that, in your experience, women should explore seeing like a pelvic floor physiotherapist after birth, even if they feel like their delivery has been, pretty much straightforward? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Like 100%. And I would argue that you should engage with a pelvic floor physiotherapist during pregnancy. So you get that kind of before and after, because there are absolutely exercises that you can be doing during pregnancy to assist with, quote unquote, a more optimal birth. And then I'm always about building the relationships with allied healthcare professionals during pregnancy. So it's not so much of a burden to find someone to engage their services and to build relationships with them post birth, because we all know that you're absolutely exhausted, you're hormonal, you're sore, you're tired. And so having all of those, I guess, key contacts and building that village prior to baby arriving just makes things so much easier. It's about the mental load as well, to try and navigate and work out who you connect with, you would know, as a GP, you want to be able to have that relationship with your patient and vice versa. So, um, from a physiological perspective, I think people, doesn't matter whether you have a vaginal birth or a C-section, you should absolutely be seeing a pelvic floor physiotherapist. I think it should be almost mandatory, and we should have programs here like they do in France, where it's subsidized for mums to engage those services afterwards, because we see so many, and I've seen it in my friends. They think it's normal to wet yourself after the birth of your baby. They think it's absolutely normal because someone has just told them, "Oh, yeah, that's just a fact of life." That's what happens when you have a baby, and it's not. It's absolutely not true, and I call BS on that completely. So, um, yeah, when we talk with our mums, we always, recommend that they go see someone as soon as they feel they're, comfortable to leave the house with bubby and things like that.
Over the last sort of 20 to 30 years, having a birth plan has become obviously, it's everyone seems to have a birth plan, but no one seems to have a plan for what's going to happen after the birth. And I often wonder whether it would be a really good idea for people to literally put that in writing so that, even just to family and friends to say, like, we're up for visitors or we're not, or, just really, I suppose that, they would love someone to come on a Wednesday morning and let them meet some friends for a coffee, and just kind of putting it out there so that, family, friends know how they could be helpful. And also if things were complicated or the person had had a really difficult time and was going to have a prolonged recovery, what their hopes would be. Is that something that people are starting to do, or is it still a way off?
No, absolutely. So when I first started Fill Your Cup, all of our, I guess, in-home care offerings had a what we call our postpartum planning session. So it was like a 2-hour game planning session. We go to the home before Bubby arrives, and we literally sit down for a couple of hours with mum and partner, and we go through our guide, which is mapping out essentially what they want their postpartum to look like. And it's looking at things like nutrition. So, how are we going to stock your fridge and freezer? It's looking at, I call them oxytocin boosters. So, when, it goes pear shaped, what are we going to do when, we're not feeling great? So, I get people to write down something that can take 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to kind of like vibe you back into the zone. So, it can be, listening to the favorite music or podcast or whatever that looks like. Um, we look at transitioning toddlers. So if you've got a little one already in the house, like what does that look like for them? How are we going to have conversations? How are we going to get them involved? How are they going to transition to become a big brother or big sister? And then we also talk about boundaries as well, which is a very, very important one. Like, as you say, how are we going to get our friends and family to support us, but also respect that boundary of, you know what, we're going to take a couple of weeks to just be a new family. And then we're going to have, people come on a Wednesday morning. And if you come, it would be really, really lovely if you bought a snack or, something like that. So we actually do that. And it became very, very apparent that people went from this state of anxiety and stress to, oh, okay, wow, that actually feels really good. I feel like, yeah, I feel like we're ready now. We've got this. And so I thought to myself, I actually need to make this as a standalone thing. So I do this face to face here in Hobart in small groups. And I also do it online, virtually for people all over the world. And we sit down and we work out what is it going to look like, because I think a lot of people, as you say, have this amazing birth plan and they've got their Excel spreadsheet with like their pram and their bassinet and their onesies and tick, 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 tick. And then baby arrives and then everyone's just like, what just happened and how are we going to manage this and the mental load of everything. Um, and as someone who is quite an anxious person, I would have loved to have like had that opportunity to sit down with my husband and be like, okay, so who's going to walk the dog and who's mowing the lawn and all of those things. So yes, it is absolutely something that we do and people love it, particularly A-type personalities like myself who like to kind of get everything, all our ducks in a row.
When you mentioned walking the dog, I can remember with my first son that being a real stress for me because I was always the dog walker and just the feeling of guilt. And in the end, my father-in-law came and took the dog away for a little holiday.
Oh, fantastic. That's so good.
I wanted to ask you just a situation that I've had recently popped into my head where um two different families, one family who lost a baby and were coming home to little siblings who were expecting a new baby to come home. And as a GP, I actually looked after quite a lot of this family. I just would love to know any just sort of thoughts or tips because unfortunately these things do happen and not everyone does get to come home with a baby. I know there's probably people listening who've had that experience or who may in the future. Have you any tips for navigating that? People don't know what to do. They don't know whether they go around, whether they don't go around. Do they ask the baby's name? Do they not ask the baby's name? Do they ask to see a photo? Do they not ask to see a photo? I just wondered over your experience, do you have any tips or ideas around those really sad times that happen?
Yeah. Um, Unfortunately, I have been a friend of two mums who that has happened to and quite late in pregnancy. So both of them were 6 months pregnant with that. So I think personally and professionally, I've had that experience. And I would say first and foremost, is around communicating to the person. And it typically can be around, I find text to be a really good thing because it's a moment where they can choose to read it or not. And it's in their own time. And maybe it's either a text or a voice message. I do find voice messages, particularly with women, resonate just that bit better. It's nice to hear someone's voice. Um, I think just letting them know that you're here, that I'm here and I'm sorry for what happened. And, when you're ready, then, reach out. Or it can be, it depends on the relationship. I've heard some people say, something like, I'm going to text you every Wednesday morning and I'm going to let you know that I'm here and that if you want to text me back or if you want to call me, like I've got time for you, like I've allocated time. Like that could be something to do as well. The other thing, like, that's kind of like from the mental and emotional perspective. I will also say that, you know, from the physicality, the mum has still been pregnant. She's still, made a baby and things like that. So in terms of nutritional, and energy kind of expenditures, she still needs to replete her body. So leaving a meal on the doorstep and just texting and saying, I've just popped a meal on the doorstep, or I find sending a voucher for a meal delivery service. There's some amazing postpartum meal delivery services across Australia. Um, just be mindful though that, like, there are things like, for example, lactation cookies or something like that, which is specific, you know, be mindful that she won't want those, so just key into that. It might be easier to engage a service like Dinner Ladies or something like that. Um, but I would just go in softly and let them know that you are there for them. And, if it's something that a family has experienced, there's a great organization called Pink Elephants as well, which is fantastic in supporting women and families when it comes to pregnancy loss as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for touching on that a difficult subject, but it's definitely one I think we need to talk more about because unfortunately in all parts of life there's death and maybe as a society we aren't as good at talking about it as maybe we would have been years before. I wanted to ask you to see if you had any tips or ideas of things that you think that are really helpful for people to do for this period of time or things that you think people shouldn't do. So mistakes that you see people making, perhaps?
As in the mums, the families doing it?
Yeah.
Wow. I think, in terms of the things that you should do, I think it comes back to those key kind of topics I was talking about in terms of the postpartum planning sessions that we do. So my top tips are always, you know, fill your fridge and freezer as if like the zombie apocalypse is coming. Think about, okay, if we weren't going to leave the house for 2 weeks, do we have enough food here to sustain ourselves? That is like the ideal situation. If you don't have capacity at your house to do that, recommendation is always either if you can buy another freezer, do that, or start what's called a like almost like a meal drop off, like a meal train with friends and family. So they can log on to this website, Meal Train, and they can nominate a day that they're going to bring a meal. And so you kind of get a meal. So food is really big. Um, I I think something that I see a lot in the first probably 3 to 4 weeks, are mums who are just totally buzzed and can't sleep and can't rest. And it is an evolutionary kind of mechanism that we're hardwired to make sure that our babies are not taken by saber-toothed tigers. And so we really struggle to be away from them and to sleep and things like that. My recommendation for that is yoga nidra, which some people kind of think, I'm not doing yoga, Renee. I've just birthed a baby. There's no way I'm like bending myself like a Gumby. It's not yoga like that. Don't panic. It's the best yoga. You literally lie on your bed like just and close your eyes and you put on a track and it's yoga nidra. You can get really good free ones on Insight Timer and it's like a body scan that there is research to support that 30 minutes of yoga nidra can be as restorative as like a 2-hour sleep. So that's something that's really, really good to do. But I think the overarching thing that I would say is that I see a lot of women, and I am this person as well. I try to do this. We're constantly reinforced in life that we can do it all and have it all by ourselves. And I would argue that you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. And so understanding that you're currently in this season of life where you are a new mum and that your job is just to, you know, recover and to bond with your baby and feed your baby. And that is enough. Like, that is enough for you to do. So don't worry about the dishwasher. It's still going to be there. Our dirty dishes are still in the kitchen. They will still be there. But just take the time to understand that your body is amazing and that you don't have to bounce back. If anything, take the time now, build and respect your body now, and you are going to pay dividends in the future for all of that.
Amazing. Renee, you have been so helpful and so generous with your knowledge. Is there anything that you think we haven't covered about the fourth trimester?
I think we've covered most of it. Yeah. In terms of like nutrition and mind and body. I think, yeah, in terms of, I think, if you're pregnant, and I know a lot of people say, oh, everyone says you got to build a village, build a village. And I'm like, you do. And I think one of the number one things that mums find it really difficult to do is ask for help. Um, But my number one tip is start practicing that in pregnancy because it's a hell of a lot easier to do it then. And then it's like going to the gym and flexing, your muscles at the gym. It's so much easier than to do it later. And learn how to say yes and learn how to say no. And it's okay for your boundaries to be up. So yeah, don't try and think you can do it all because it's so much nicer when you've got a beautiful supportive network around you.
And if anyone listening is thinking about having a doula, but they're thinking it might be, really, really expensive or beyond their reach, can you give me, I mean, I know obviously different people charge different amounts of money, but can you give me a rough idea of what someone would actually be paying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess our most popular package is around 2,700, and that includes care straight away with us. So if you called us and said, I'm 4 months pregnant, I'd love to have 6 weeks of postpartum care. For us, we're very similar to kind of like a midwife or your OB. He can call and go, oh, this is happening, whatever. We've got a great WhatsApp chat, so you can jump in there. I say you can have a referral, a reference, or a rant, whatever you like, on the daily. Um, and so we kind of are there the whole way through pregnancy, and then we are there in the postpartum. So that would include 18 hours of postpartum care. In each of your sessions, it's a 3-hour session. We come to your house. You get a menu every week. You get main meals and snacks, and it's really, really generous amounts of food. I'm European, so I don't know how to cook for one. It's just not in my brain. And so coming from my biochemistry background, I have curated the menu specific to replete all those lost micronutrients that we had depleted during pregnancy. So everything is very intentional with not only the ingredients that we pair together in the meal, but also the stage of your postpartum that we actually offer particular meals. So yeah, lots of food, lots of chats, lots of opportunity to hold space, and obviously those practical things where we Mary Poppins your house and do your laundry and hang out with your beautiful children and make sure that you go and have naps and things like that. So yeah.
And are you just based in Tasmania or?
No, we're pretty much all across the eastern coast now. So we've got doulas in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Geelong, Hobart, uh, and also we do have a doula in Newcastle as well.
Okay, amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat, and thank you for educating us all about the fourth trimester, which I have to admit was not a term that I had heard until probably the last 3 or 4 months, and it was popping up on social media a bit. So I think definitely people are beginning to talk about it a little bit more, which can only be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Shauna.
You're so welcome. Thank you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.